Hello and welcome to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name is George Browne.
And I'm Chris.
And this is quite a special episode.
It is. This is very exciting.
For a number of reasons. First and foremost, we're in the same room, which is an unusual thing when we're recording these podcasts.
It is.
Even more specially, we're in my house.
With a glass of red.
Or a glass of whiskey.
Obviously.
And we're being reasonably quiet because my kids are asleep 2 rooms away.
We'll see how long that lasts.
And the reason that Chris is here is because Chris is joining us on the family shoot tomorrow, which is very exciting. And the second half of this episode is going to be about the shoot specifically.
With your dad.
With my dad. But for now, we're joined by 2 other chaps who are going to be joining us in the line tomorrow. Highly esteemed members of the most noble order of the Garters. But gentlemen, we're not going to do what we normally do and say lots of nice things about what fabulous people you are.
And what amazing things you've done in the insurance market. But yeah, we'll steer clear.
So I think we're just going to get you to introduce yourselves. So you go first.
My name is Sheldon. I'm AKA Dogs on Pegs and a hat-wearing Garter member.
And I'm Angus. No spotty hat, unfortunately. Not as yet, any rate, but certainly a Garter wearer.
And we've just had a very nice supper, even though I say so myself.
It was very well cooked.
It was massively improved by the very nice wine that we had. And we're going to continue on that theme. We're going to have a little drink. So let's start with Sheldon. What's that you're drinking?
So I'm drinking largely a beautiful glass of red wine, but also been given a lovely cocktail of a Shake Baby Shake strawberry daiquiri, which wouldn't normally be my first choice, but I think when in the countryside, enjoy what the chaps can bring you. So I shall open it live and drink some of it as we speak.
Very good.
I looked at it and it just had your name written all over it.
Actually, it's nicer than it could be. Very, very tasty indeed.
This is a canned, pre-prepared cocktail that Chris bought in the petrol station.
The services
is that right?
on the M3. Absolutely brilliant for choosing podcast drinks.
I was hoping on my inaugural way of talking through this podcast, I'd be able to have a really good story about what I was drinking, but the Shake Baby Shake strawberry daiquiri is the alternative.
Shake Baby Shake is the effect, right? That's what
It's going to make Sheldon shake baby shake. I don't want to see this. Right, move on.
Okay, Angus, what have you got?
Well, I'm worried because you said it's got your name on it. This one's got dirty written on the front of it, which is a little bit offensive in some ways. I've got Mango Passion, alcoholic sparkling water.
Alcoholic I mean, that sounds better than just sparkling water.
Yes, slightly, but I will tell you now. Hang on.
I feel that all sparkling water should be alcoholic.
Yeah.
or no?
Not pre-wine. No, post-wine. No.
What have we actually got sitting next to us?
We have rather a nice Gamay, which we're enjoying here. 2021. It's rather nice.
So that's what I'm drinking, George.
That's what you're drinking. How have you got away without having to have one of these things? So I've been told.
I'll have a bit of yours in a minute.
I've been told that I absolutely have to have some of my passion fruit martini, which I'm not excited about at all, but needs must. So here we go.
This is your worst nightmare in a can.
Do you know what it's like? Actually, it tastes almost exactly the same as Lilt.
Oh, send it over.
So you can have that.
Oh, thank you for trying it, George.
And I am going to have...
It's very hard to just get him even to try a drink. And then he goes back to norm straight away.
I am passing you this purple tiger skin can.
It does look lovely, doesn't it? Oh my God, have you seen the radioactive stuff appearing out the top of it? Anyway.
Is it Lilt or is it Five Alive that it reminds me of?
Oh, Five Alive.
I was
Five Alive.
Bongo.
Oh, yeah, an alcoholic and bongo.
So yes, I'm staying true to form, and I've got a very nice glass of whiskey, the standard fare, which is the Aberlour 12-year-old.
Just to clarify, it's absolutely alcoholic and bongo. That's quite something. I think they just stole the Mbongo recipe and added alcohol.
I'm sure there's a song that goes with that. I'm not going to try.
It's nice though. This is the night before a shoot day. I get very excited as podcast listeners.
I can tell you obviously
know.
got very overexcited in the petrol station.
Yeah, well, why not? I get a chance to buy you a drink and you have to drink it. That's very exciting.
Have you ever known me say no to a drink?
Yes, nearly then.
Well, nearly being the operative word.
But it's the night before a shoot day. I get very excited about the night before a shoot day because it is my, peak excitement. And to be all here down at the farm that I've never been to before. Very, very exciting.
Well, the one that we've listened to for several
Well, I was going to
years
say,
now.
so the reason I thought that I'd get my dad on for the second half of the podcast is because we've talked about lots of shoots on the podcast over the last 3 years or whatever it is, but no shoot has been mentioned more often than this one. But we're in the second half, there's going to be a big deep dive into the last 120 years of the shoot.
Year by year. Are you doing season by season? Season by season account of drives and headshot?
Yeah, we tried this drive like that once and it didn't work, and we tried it again like that. But yeah, I'm really pleased to have you guys down here, and I hope everybody enjoys the second half of the podcast. But it's very exciting to have you all down. And we've had some cold weather, and there's birds all over the show. So far this year, we have not been successful in really getting them to go over the guns. They've sort of gone past the guns rather than over. But with
Does that
any
mean
luck,
through?
No, it means they've gone sideways rather than
yeah.
forwards, for
Okay.
the most part.
Yeah.
And who knows what tomorrow will bring. But there's lots of them around. We'll see a lot. We just might not shoot very many. But it'll
Very
be a lovely
exciting.
day anyway.
Yeah,
It'll be really good
It'll
fun.
be good either way.
Looking forward to that, and we're looking forward to the 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes start of shoot instructions as well.
Oh, that's not me, that's Dad, and it'll be at least 10.
Ah,
Oh, yes. I enjoyed that conversation. So we've got you guys here to do the really fun stuff, which is discuss the correspondence which George has picked out of our mailbag.
Groaning mailbag.
Yeah.
So your job, gentlemen, is to provide, well, I was going to say educated and well-informed advice, but that would be...
Independent intelligence advice.
Exactly, but we haven't done that for 67 episodes
so
so
don't
far.
start
So I don't see why we'd begin. But yeah, we'll try and do our
all of a
best.
sudden I feel qualified.
So the first piece of correspondence we have is a Whose Bird Is It Anyway, which comes from somebody who emailed pod@gunsonpegs.com, who I have decided to name Montgomery. And Montgomery has written, and I've chosen this one specifically for you guys because I know that you're Syndicate Shoot members. And he says, I recently joined a syndicate this season on a farm shoot, which is really good fun, great days out, and I'm glad to be a part of it. The night before the first day this season, the shoot captain messaged the shoot WhatsApp group, making sure that we were all ready for the day and so on, but also dropped in the hint that the tip money was to go up from last season, which seemed a bit odd as it's a DIY shoot where all the guns chip in with the feeding, etc. The fee last season was £30 per gun, but it's now gone up £10 purely because one of the guns who helps on the shoot has broken his quad bike whilst out feeding. It seems a bit odd to me that we are all paying for the repair of his quad bike because nobody else is allowed to use it when we're out feeding. It has certainly caused a stir amongst the syndicate members. I'd like to know you guys' opinion.
Hold on, let me get this straight. Over the course of the year, they're going to claim back in the form of tips the fees for repairing a guy's quad who brings it. And let's be honest, he hasn't got this quad solely for feeding purposes, has
Correct.
he?
Well, I assume not. No.
No, I mean, it's his quad. He doesn't let anyone else use it. And because he goes feeding with it, through the form of tips, he's going to reclaim some maintenance fees for his quad.
Sounds like it.
Right, I'll let someone else go first.
So I want to ask you first of all, so your syndicate, it's kind of DIY, but mostly not? Like you could have some work party days and that kind of stuff, but the day-to-day stuff is run by your brother, I think.
Yep, that's my brother. Yeah, Dickon, who's a writer in the.
Check out his articles, by the way. They are
There you go.
great.
On Scribehound.
Oh, Scribehound, yeah, absolutely.
The Squirrel Cup.
And yeah, the Squirrel Cup, the infamous Squirrel Cup.
Too soon for that.
So it's DIY. My brother, incredibly passionately involved, etc., with it and doing it, day in day out, for the love as anything else. We don't do tips. We put expenses into the kind of tally up at the end of the season.
And the beating and picking up team is all, family and friends and
Absolutely,
kids
just literally, there's a group of people who come along for the love of it, and we too try and make sure we feed them at lunchtime, etc. But there's nothing else that goes on from that, and we've got plenty of people coming, so that's not the model we run. But everybody puts things in, so we don't. People who brings the tractor and drives the trailer and all of that kind of things. Nobody's trying to repair the tractor or putting the diesel in it, etc. So, it's a different model. It's definitely a different model.
That's the thing about syndicates, though. They are in all forms, aren't they? They are, and that's what's so lovely about it. This one there's obviously a bit more going on. To even get to this point suggests so. But it's odd. What do you think? What's your initial reaction to this scenario?
It feels like the quad bike is quite vital to the syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, then perhaps they should be willing to chip in. But to do it surreptitiously is a little bit unfortunate.
That's what I think's odd, isn't it? It's like in the form of a tip.
So everyone chip in 20 quid once and we'll get it repaired would be a better way than saying,
exactly.
Bleed it out through the season.
The quad bike that keeps the pheasants in the drives has had an issue.
My quad bike.
We'll just add it to the bill.
Exactly. I don't need a tip to let me know that that's important.
I feel like we're missing an important bit of this email, though, and I hesitate to have a dig at our correspondence, but he seems very upset about not being allowed to have a go on the quad bike. Like, just give him a tenner and you can have a go.
Oh, now there's the thing. Charge for rides.
Yeah.
No, they could actually make money that way.
But also, though, he knows, or he thinks he knows, that this is entirely why the £10 addition has been added. He just said it's because of this.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's. I'm wondering whether it's a hunch. Actually,
Do you think it's a hunch?
well, it doesn't sound like. I spoke to the captain and he said that's what's happened. It just sounds like I'm angry and I think this is what's happened. I've put 2 and 2 together and I've made 8. I don't know. There's a chance, at least.
Well, unless it's in the bill and it's but 8 days at 8 guns and all of a sudden it's £640.
That's a brand new quad. Yeah.
You've not bought a quad recently, have you?
Exactly. You're not getting a quad for that.
Not.
But I don't know. Like, it sounds to me like it's not 8 days. 30 quid per person per day, going up to 40.
To be
It's
fair,
not
though,
that steep, is it?
well, it depends it doesn't really depend what it is. I mean, it doesn't really matter what shoot you're in. You're not getting away for a lot less than. I mean, what's the smallest tip is vaguely acceptable, irrespective of what happens on a shoot day.
I'm glad you're asking that the day before George's shoot.
Yes. We've had the email, haven't we?
I went to the M3 services and the cash
I
point.
forgot to tell you the tips have gone up by £10.
What, for No.
Of course it is.
That's actually it's for the meal we've just eaten.
Exactly, yeah. The thing about tipping is it goes in denominations of 10, doesn't it? People don't do fivers. Well, cash points don't do fivers.
You must have heard the story about the keeper who was being tipped, and the guide got a couple of fivers in his wedge, and it all went wrong in the handshake, and the fivers blew away, and the keeper quite acidly went, "I think you need it more than me."
Oh, that's worth a slap, that.
I'm sure it's apocryphal.
Yeah. But what my point was going to be that on the basis that tips go up in denominations of 10, they would have gone to 30 a little bit ahead of their time. And I reckon that they go to 40 behind. And so what I'm saying is it could have been sort of 10 years ago.
It's just inflation.
I reckon it's inflation plus a few years. And 10 years ago, they were probably 30, in which case that's very much 40 now. And there also could be a lot of that.
But I mean, it sounds to me, it's caused a stir amongst the other syndicate members. It sounds to me like this is, we've said before on this podcast, all syndicates end in acrimony.
Yeah.
They're not far away.
It's just interesting. It's the model they're doing. I mean, if the model is the tips contribute to the cost of the shoot, it is still just a way to charge the guns. But I guess you can get something off guests as well to contribute. Maybe that's the difference.
Yeah.
Charge them twice as much in tips.
The thing is,
that helps. That's actually quite useful when you think about it.
If this guy's the guy on his quad bike out feeding, and he's the one with the quad, and they're the one paying for the quad, who else is doing the feeding? Are they doing the feeding by hand with no quad bike?
I mean, that's the choice, isn't it? You give this guy the tenner, or you carry the sacks of feed.
But I think it's just the brazenness to say, well, there's 500 quid's worth of repairs needed on this bike. Just can you take it out of the kitty rather than through the tip?
I think this is where the guy's gone wrong. He's gone to tips, which is just tips isn't a fee, is it? Tip is a tip. And also, like, telling everyone what the tip will be for this year, I've also found that slightly odd.
Yeah, it's always discretionary.
It's discretionary but guided, but there has to be an element of discretion. Like, right, guys, the tip is 40 quid. Like, you might as well just call it a fee and stick it in the bill, mate. I mean, that's not...
other than your guests are contributing if you collect it as tips on the day.
Yeah, that's slightly different. You can guide them, but obviously you did have a lovely day. If you want to do 60, 80, as you're a guest.
Did he say that it was known that it was for the quad, but it was suspect?
It says that the fee has gone up by £10 purely because one of the guns who helps on the shoot has broken his quad.
That sounds expressed, doesn't it?
That sounds like hearsay to me.
Yeah.
I
don't think the purely is as purely as it
I reckon
sounds.
there's more than one shoot WhatsApp group going on.
What does he actually want to know?
What do we think? He wants to know our opinion.
My opinion is you should get together and pay for the repair of the quad bike and leave the tips as they were.
If there's an issue with the quad bike and it's down to the fact that he drives it a lot on the shoot and not the fact that he rags it around his own farm, etc.
Put it on the shoot bill.
Yeah. Or at least, if he is fundamental to dogging in the pheasants, yeah, of course. He's the one.
Yeah, I
with the
think you
quad
have
bike.
to appreciate that the quad is obviously a vital bit of kit.
It's like pickers up being paid a bit more than the beaters. It's the same deal, isn't it? No, they've got something else going on there.
Yeah. But also, come on, it's a 10.
Yeah, that too.
Well, it's 80 quid over the season.
One pheasant.
What does 80 quid get you on a quad bike, Sheldon?
I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, I think this is crying over spilt milk slightly.
That's what I think. I think it's a syndicate shoot. Like, none of it's going to cost that much.
Yeah.
The extra tenner. Seriously, it's a couple of pints. Like, just suck it up.
Yeah, and about one if you're in London.
And do you really want to upset? Do you want to upset the man with the quad bike? No.
No,
Yeah,
You don't want to.
if he's the man that puts your pheasants in your drive, then don't even ask any
Not
questions
even that.
in the
It's
first
do you
place.
want to carry the sacks of feed
Yeah.
all that way?
Do you want to buy your own quad bike and do it yourself?
That exactly. The alternatives are much worse.
Yeah.
Than paying the tenner. But it sounds like it maybe could have been handled a bit better.
We don't
from the shoot
often
captain.
maybe we do often go completely against some correspondence. I think back in the box slightly there.
Sorry, Monty.
Yeah.
Stump up.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the form of 80 quid now.
Yeah.
Make it 100 for cash.
On that note, I shall have some more alcoholic and mongo.
Strawberry daiquiri time.
Right. Got another query here from someone that George has called Albert. Oh, by the way, why was he called Montgomery?
Because I thought he was a bit stingy, so I've named him after Monty Burns off The Simpsons.
Nothing to do with vehicles in deserts or anything
I
like
was
that.
thinking
No.
that main
No.
backwards.
No, it was a Simpsons reference. Because sometimes I go highbrow,
Yeah.
and sometimes I go lowbrow.
Yeah, I like that. So this one comes from someone that George has called Albert. An invite arrived for a 2-day trip to a Scottish estate to enjoy a single-driven 200 to 250 bird day. Excitement ensued. Mrs. G agreed in principle, and so some background work began. I researched the estate and their gamekeeper and previous reports on how good the shooting had been. There was a full list of prices for various days throughout the season, clearly dependent on the date, popularity and size of the bag chosen. My appetite was certainly whetted. Having already been given the price, hotel and travel arrangements, etc., I was now more enlightened about what was happening. No doubt you and your listeners are at least one sentence ahead with regards to this story and where it goes. The cheeky individual of dubious parentage had submitted a price to participants that clearly included his costs in full. Being an honest individual, this did not sit right. So, I contacted the usual suspects who would also have received an invite. Quelle surprise, my suspicions were correct. So, the dilemma. Do I, A, politely decline, B, pay up and shut up, C, arrange an alternative trip on a different date to the same shoot with all costs clearly listed for all parties, D, meet said individual in the quiet to save any embarrassment and explain our concern, E, some other solution. I'll stick an F in there, which can go with the some other solution, which is oust him straight away if you think this is genuine, and we'll have a chat about it. Right, so I know who this is, and his name's...
Right. Huh. Okay.
Absolutely convinced. It's come to me from two other people, one of which I know very well, and you know, who was on the receiving end of a chap who did this to a team, and they no longer book with that person. And he's still very much active, shooting a lot with all sorts of teams. So anyway, if this is what's happening, it's mental, isn't it? So he's rung up other team members. They've looked at the prices on the website of this shoot, and they know they're paying essentially 9 guns shooting 8 type thing, whatever that. Don't know if I explained that correctly, but and so this guy's going along scot-free on the fact that he's just, cheeky as fuck, right?
Yes.
It's a lot of organisation, as anyone who's organised these days would suggest.
You're fucking telling me.
I guess what's unfortunate is they're doing it underhand. I think if you said, I'll organise a day, but I'm going to add X% because it's going to quantify it towards my day, I don't think it's a problem doing that.
If you're upfront about it.
If you're upfront, but if you're doing it sneakily, saying it's £100 a day and I'm going to get a free day.
But even then, you've got to say, guys, would it be okay? I'll happily organise the day, but it would be okay if sort of for all the hassle, like a bit comes off my peg type thing.
But it's also all of the costs, right? So they're paying for his hotel and everything. Like if it was just his peg, I'd be like, well, it's kind of a bit like being an agent for the day. Like, fine, take your fee, be upfront about it. But paying for his hotel. That's.
I guess if it was a roving syndicate and everyone took a time each year to do it.
You know what's going to happen. They're paying for his wine, his food on the thing. The rest of it, aren't they?
Yeah.
I'm just jealous I've not thought about it first.
Marked your card, haven't we?
Hang on a minute. Have you thought about it first? I haven't checked into all those days we've done.
Are you sure it's not Sheldon?
So what does he do? The problem is you're asking a bunch of people in good spirits having a drink the night before a shoot. You're going to get a really aggressive answer.
Well, okay, I can tell you which one we're definitely not going with pay up. Option B, pay up and shut up, as we did before. We were like, just fucking pay the man.
Yeah,
for the quad.
We're not
this
doing
time
that on
round,
this one.
That's not.
Do not accept this. It has to stop now because he's not the only team he's doing it to. Like this guy's getting a season in this way.
You have to vote with your feet, don't you?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to pick a fight, but you can not be part of it.
Yeah, but you can pick a fight. It's fun, isn't it?
If you want to pick a fight, I think posting in one of those Facebook groups is the way forward.
Or writing into Guns on Peg.
And being named.
Read out.
No, because even though I've named who I think this person is, George is definitely bleeping.
Are you hoping I'm going to bleep it, are you?
I don't know how I'm going to control that, but if you don't,
Okay.
Just in case I'm wrong, obviously, but I'm fairly certain I'm not.
It could be libel.
There's also another reason I think I'm not wrong. I'll tell you later.
It's not the first time I've heard of it, mind you.
Well, I was going to say,
I reckon quite a few
it
people
happens
do
a
this.
lot.
It's proper bad form.
Yeah.
It's
It's
proper.
bad
Also,
form.
how can you enjoy your day knowing that all these other people have...
No, you enjoy that a lot more.
Actually, that sounds amazing.
No, sure. Like if other people have paid for you, but like in one way or
But they
another,
want
like
to.
it's a bit. Yeah, exactly. They want to. Like, yeah, fine. But if you're like sneakily being like, I don't know, it's just weird. Like you can't. That's not a nice feeling.
No. That hotel room was an extra 50 for no apparent reason. That's just not right.
That's not right. It's
not right.
So so Chris, you're for name and shame.
Oh yeah. At the moment, I am. Maybe like Monday morning, I might be like, a bit more polite about it. But so one of his options he offered to us was arrange an alternative trip on a different day to the same shoot with all costs clearly listed for all the parties who he thinks this person's invited. What's interesting is he thinks he knows who half the team is or more. If he does, that's a great shout.
Yeah.
Because that would make the guy look like a right idiot, wouldn't it? Because he'd know.
Yeah, and you make sure you send him lots of nice pictures on.
Yeah,
the day
he'd be
as
like,
well.
"I love your day. Sorry, we couldn't make your one."
Somehow it's slightly cheaper than what you offered us as well.
It's not just the price; it's all the more enjoyable because you're not here.
I think the vote by your feet is a good option. Just kind of don't go along with it.
It's vote by your feet, and then if you're feeling a little bit more vindictive or designed to out it, is to say, "I'm not becoming because."
Yeah.
And you tell your fellow invitees that you know the reason why you're not.
What do we think about option D, which is meet the person on the quiet and say, "Are you sure?"
Yeah, so these aren't mutually exclusive, are they?
Yeah.
You need to do a bit of C, which is arrange an alternative trip. D, meet the guy. So you can do A, politely decline, arrange an alternative, and meet him at the same time.
Say, "Listen up, mate.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, we're on to you."
Yeah. And we're not having this anymore because that's just
Because
not the way
presumably
things
they're
work
quite
around here.
matey, otherwise they wouldn't be getting the invite.
It's one of those invites to pay, though, isn't it?
but very poor form. Did I tell you, by the way, the fee for tomorrow is 500?
All right, what I want to know is the latest anyone's been in a shoot scenario where they've been told they then have to pay.
Bacon sandwiches.
At the end of the shoot briefing.
when you've agreed to overages after the third drive.
That's when the invoice comes a week after.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's got to have happened, hasn't it?
Oh,
It's a
I'm sure.
lovely day you had, and then the invoice arrives. That's definitely happened, hasn't it? If that has happened to you, pod@gunsonpegs.com, please tell us how that was for you. Wowzers. So we're suggesting A, politely decline, C, arrange an alternative trip on a different date to the same shoot with all costs clearly listed for all parties. D, meet said individual on the quiet to save an embarrassment, explain our concern. And there's a little bit of E suggested, some other solution, which is go a step further if this guy's a real shyster.
Yeah, a standard
Let's
walk
make
past
sure
is a
that
standard set, isn't it?
Others within our group of mutual unknown friends don't share the same fate.
When this episode goes out and we post about it, you share it and tag the person.
Though I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
really
hashtag is this you?
And what does it use for a bleep?
Haven't decided yet.
Partridge,
Might
must
not
be
use one
partridge.
at all.
Oh,
It's the pheasant noise.
the pheasant.
It is the pheasant. I might have lost it though. Okay, and so the last piece of correspondence that we've got is a plea from somebody I'm going to call Robinson, who has written, I was introduced to clay shooting by my grandfather over 2 years ago, and I've been hooked ever since, shooting fortnightly. However, over the past year, I've become interested in shooting game, and I have no idea of how to get into it. My grandfather has shot game many times in the past, and is still physically and financially able to do it, but he claims he has no interest in it and much prefers clay shooting. I am yet to obtain a license and my own shotgun, so I'm pretty much reliant upon my grandfather to shoot at all. He's the only member of my family to shoot, despite his constant attempts to get my father and uncles to join in the sport. As well as this, I have no friends of my age who shoot, nor do I know any adults that do, apart from my girlfriend's father, but I don't really feel up to asking the 6'4" father of my girlfriend if I can tag along with him. I've thought of using Guns on Pegs to book myself a day, but I would like to go with at least one person I know for my first ever time, and I'm beginning to see that this may be impossible, especially with no friends who have even shot clays before. Therefore, my question is this. How do I get into shooting game with no connections to the sport at all? I think I must have edited the bit out where he says he's 17, but he's 17.
So he's old enough for a license.
He needs to obviously get his license. It does make it slightly more awkward if you don't have one in trying to get into it, because, you know, turning up with a gun is fairly fundamental.
What I definitely wouldn't be doing is booking a single peg on a day
No.
through Guns on Pegs. I just don't think that's the right...
Or,
You mean he's not
or any
ready?
other lower side, lesser
If
side.
you've never shot game before, you
yeah.
turn up on a, on a driven day, having never done it before, with a bunch of people you don't know, like, it's going to be terrifying.
Well, but he could do it if he's in the clay world. He could do it with an instructor from the clay place and go
That's
with
a
him
very
on
good
that
idea.
day.
That's
So-
a great shout. Yeah, go to your playground where you go, say to the guy who taught you, right, come on.
I really fancy going on game.
What's the fee for you to come and join me for a whole day? Make sure I don't do anything wrong, look after me, keep me safe, and just, keep me on the straight and narrow. That's a great shout. A lot of people do that, and actually, it's a very normalised thing.
What's the cut-off for a Basque Young Shots Day?
Good question. Don't know.
I don't know the answer, but
But it
worth-
probably 17's okay.
Yeah, I'd have thought so.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking about this is there's lots and lots of ladies shooting groups that are specifically set up to help
For this-
ladies get into shooting.
Yeah.
There isn't an equivalent for guys, as far as I know. It's just sort of assumed that you'll have the connections
It's a
and
fair
all the
point.
money.
It's a really fair
But there
point.
isn't like a club that I know of that you could join.
I think that we might be trying to solve a problem that isn't there slightly, in that when you said don't turn up on a single peg thing, I actually think that is what everyone does, just with Sheldon's suggestion of
An instructor.
Or ring the shoot. Look, I've shot clays loads. I'm confident of all the etiquette and the safety. It's my first game day though. can I have someone from the shoot stand with me? You'll need to tip them a little bit. Sure, here's the deal. That I think happens a lot. And I think if you're upfront about it, you could book a single peg on a roving day. And one of his other points in here isn't about all that. It's about then like friendships. There's so many people I know that have turned up on days where they're like mixed groups of guns and they end up friends for life type scenarios.
If it's local enough, that's true. And I think we've been on days where we bought a couple of pegs, and sometimes it's a bit weird because you feel a bit outsidery. But I think in this sport, fortune favours the brave, and you have to kind of go out there a little bit and
you do.
enjoy
You've
it.
got to try.
Yeah.
You can't be like get back in your car after the drive type thing. You know, I don't agree with that. No, I hate those people.
Glad you cleared that up for tomorrow.
If you do
Hold the Diet Coke tomorrow.
your windscreen's gone during 11s.
It's Angus's car, so that's fine.
No, fine.
But I mean, we're also missing the absolutely blindingly obvious answer, which is find the local syndicate, go beating.
You've
Beaters
said this
Day.
before on many other podcasts.
Like
get involved in the shoot.
If I ruled the world, you would not be allowed to shoot a game day without beating for a season first.
I agree with that.
Because like you can't. Yes, you can shoot, but you actually need to understand how the whole day works.
Yeah.
You can't just stand on the peg and have birds pushed over you.
No, I agree.
I think because then you think of them as clays. You have to understand
That's true.
the whole process. I would say that there will be a syndicate out there who'll be absolutely thrilled to have you come beating with them and get out there and do it.
And if you're that keen, then get you in the syndicate.
But also, you'll then make the friendships through the beating team. Someone in the beating team's probably got some pigeon shooting. You go and shoot some pigeons, etc., etc., etc. And then you'll find out whether the whole thing. You don't want to drop 500, 600, 800 quid on a driven day, only to learn that it's not really for you.
And girlfriend's father's
He's
there.
17.
He might be 6'4", but that doesn't mean he's not a decent bloke. And most shooting people will get you involved in shooting. Go beat.
Like how much do you like this girl as well?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, go be there.
I reckon he's punching with his girlfriend because he's obviously feeling a bit nervous about asking his father-in-law, who clearly he feels like might not like him.
Father-in-law, have you gone too far there?
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, okay.
no, but I mean, like, could be
Girlfriend's
onto a
there.
winner. Like,
Yeah, he's there.
maybe he's got a grouse.
Well, I guess also now that he's been mentioned on the podcast, he is a Order of the Garter member.
He will be.
And maybe invited to the next Order of the Garter day, if that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Which
After he's beat for it for a year,
Yeah.
according to George.
and he could probably invite his girlfriend's dad to come and load for him
Oh, now we're talking.
on the podcast day.
If only you'd asked me first, Father. Ops.
If I got a gig for you, you're going to drive me to
I'm borrowing your gun, and you're loading.
and you won't believe it, you're loading for me as well.
He'll
Enjoy.
have to cut the stock down, won't he, then?
Yes, he would have to cut the stock down a bit, or shoot from the hip.
Oh, Del Boy.
I think he's worrying about it a little bit too much.
Yeah.
But it is like it's so easy for us. Who've all grown up in
You're
it,
so true.
to go. This is just easy,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Oh, and your first day, if you've not done it, I imagine you'd be absolutely bricking it that
I'm
first
bricking
time.
it first drive every day, and I've been shooting for 30 years
You are really bad, though.
and old. But I think it's so easy for us to sit here and blithely go, oh well, this, that, and the other. But it is, and actually, good on him for writing in and saying I don't know what to do. Because
Yeah, I agree.
And
Yeah, but
it
I've
is
only shot
hard.
15 years of my many years alive, and I think you have to be a bit bold on these things. You have to invite yourself, and I've beaten the syndicate for a number of years before I was invited to shoot and the beaters days, and so I think unless you lean into these things, and unless you're kind of willing to do a bit more, these things that you're not going to be invited to the 300 bird day in the Cotswolds unless you're willing to do a little bit of work beforehand.
Yeah, I do think you have to put in your apprenticeship.
Agreed completely. 100%. Get in there, get involved, show yourself willing, get behind a stick rather than a gun to start with. Get in that way.
Sometimes I reckon beaters have more fun than
That's
the
a
guns.
crack.
You can get
that's not true.
you
That's
can
not
get
true.
a lot more pissed than the guns. Like,
From the start of
That's
the day.
definitely true.
and the best jokes are always on the beat.
The loveliest scenario here, though,
Mostly.
the loveliest scenario would be that he joined the syndicate, went beating, and then his first day was on the syndicate the year after, and he asked one of the syndicate members or someone to stand with him on that first day, who he had become friends with as a result of being a part of the syndicate, and had his journey into it like that. That would just be an epic story, and that's got to have happened so many times, and that is what could happen here.
Yeah, that's the classic route in.
Well,
It's what happened to you.
That's happened with Angus and I. That's exactly how I got into it. I was beating on the syndicate for a couple of 3 years.
We'd stand with you.
I got offered the gun. Angus, I hadn't really shot before. Angus kind of stood with me to teach me how to kind of the etiquette around the peg. And now I teach him a thing or two myself.
Yeah.
About shooting.
But also, we've done the same thing with your wife.
My wife and my children and your...
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah, and the kids. Yeah. Same thing.
That's
Me
epic.
first.
There you go.
That's exactly what needs to happen. Perfect. Solved it.
What's that? 3 from 3. That's good.
You're right, actually. 3 genuinely useful, not 2 taking the piss answers to 3 questions. I mean, okay.
Well, that's what we
I take it
think.
back.
Is that right?
2 out of 3. 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3 in bed.
Good. Right. So, Montgomery, Albert, and Robinson.
Oh, hold on. Why was he called Robinson?
Oh, wait, why was he called Albert?
Albert, because he'd obviously done the maths very quickly, Albert Einstein.
I was thinking stepson's son.
That could also have worked. And Robinson, because he's lonely. Robinson Crusoe.
Oh, he's just got to turn the screw on the poor chap. He can come and join us.
No man is an island. So Montgomery, Albert, and Robinson are all the newest members of the most noble order of the Garters, and will very soon be in receipt of a set of the highly coveted Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock Garters. If you too have got a shooting confession, quandary, or a query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you've got an unpopular opinion you'd like to share, or if you'd like to tell us about a forgotten drive and you would like a set of Garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com. Right, so as we said at the beginning of the episode, the shoot here on the farm is probably... It might be the most talked about shoot in shooting.
Well, on this podcast, anyway.
given that nobody talks about shooting as much as we do on this podcast, and it's mentioned in every single episode. And because these 3 chaps and a few others are joining us on the shoot tomorrow, I thought it would be very interesting to look back at the history of the shoot here on the farm. So earlier today, I sat down with my dad, who is the most qualified person there is to talk about the shoot, and I recorded our conversation. So here is that interview. I don't know if it's an interview. Anyway, whatever it is, here it is. Welcome to the Guns on Pegs podcast.
Thank you very much.
It feels quite weird to be interviewing my own dad, but...
Try sitting in my seat.
First of all, I suppose we probably better let all the listeners know who you are.
My name's Simon Browne. We live just north of Winchester. My family have farmed here since 1961, though the farm was actually tenanted with a life tenant as existed in those days until 1960. But my father was the first member of the family to actually farm here.
So when did the family first purchase the farm? How long ago was that?
I believe it was around about 1900. And there's a bit of an apocryphal story. My great-grandfather was a doctor in Winchester, and my father always said that it was uncertain whether the papers were signed by the patient alive or dead. But we won't dwell too much on that, because we've had it for a long time and nobody's going to challenge us anymore.
And so when did you take over the farming?
My father died in 1980, which was far too young. He was only 60. And so, in terms of the shoot, I started getting involved a lot earlier than that.
And there has been, we'll get onto this in a bit more detail, but there's been a shoot on the farm pretty much the whole time, I think.
There has. When the farm was tenanted, the tenant had the shooting rights. He was called Percy Bragg, and I think he was a bit of a cad. Well, cad is possibly the wrong word, but he was quite a tough individual, I believe. He and 1 or 2 others definitely ran what was called the War Ag during the Second World War, which was basically determining how farmers in the area should behave. And I've got a feeling they stitched it up pretty well to look after their own interests.
Okay. Right. So, as you know, having listened to a few of these podcasts and seen the after effects of some of them as well, we like to have a drink.
No, I can't be persuaded. I'm terribly sorry.
What have you done with
I'll
my
make
real
an
dad?
exception on this occasion because we are celebrating this week the birth of my new granddaughter Poppy for my son Jim and his wife Georgia, and so we're going to pop a cork in a moment.
Well, I think we should pop it now. Should we do that?
Fine. So the bottle we're popping is actually the same as we served at their wedding. It's a Method Champenoise from South Africa, supplied by Stonevine and Son, and local wine merchant. Simon actually went to school with me, who's the wine merchant. It's called Claudia, and it's from the most beautiful place called Hemelanard, near Hermanus, in not far from Cape Town, and it's really quite delicious.
Well, before I actually take the cork off, I'm just going to say you're quite brave letting me open it, because the last time I opened a bottle of champagne on the podcast, it obviously got a bit agitated, and I was recording sitting on my bed in the flat in Greenwich. The cork hit the ceiling, the champagne went everywhere, and it was all a bit of a catastrophe. So fingers crossed this one goes a bit better.
Well, I haven't let you shake it up anyway. Oh, that was a fat. That wasn't a pop.
So we're going to raise a glass to my new niece.
Oh, astonishing good luck, and especially to Poppy.
Here, here, and I'm going to keep the bottle while we do this. Okay, right, so the shoot then. So there's been a shoot here for a very long time. What do you know about the very early days of the shoot, back in the very early 1900s?
What I'm told, and what I've read, is that it was purely a partridge shoot. It was keepered. There were belts of conifers over which English partridges were driven. The keeper would stand on a pheasant's nest when he found it because he didn't trust them.
Oh wow! Thought they would be detrimental to the greys.
That's right. All greys, partridges, and believe it or not, there was actually a book, a novel written by J.K. Stanford of the 12th and After fame, called Guns Wanted. And although it's not named as this particular place, we know that it was about it. There are certain geographical things that are absolutely certain. The farm buildings has a horseshoe of beech trees around it, and that's mentioned in the book. And it's known that he shot here.
So it was sort of a respected enough shoot, I guess, in that sense that it was worth writing about. But I think it was, because I've read the book, and I think it was probably chosen because it was not run-of-the-mill, but not a big grand affair.
No, I'm pretty certain that Percy Bragg, the tenant, did run a syndicate, which is what is talked about in this book. And so there was probably that model used. And no doubt there were some dodgy characters in there as well.
I mean, I think there's dodgy characters on most shoots. Okay, so that's the very early days, and it was wild grey partridges, keepered. So then the farming gets taken back into the family in the 60s.
Yep.
What then happens with the shoot?
Well, my father was not a very keen shot. He enjoyed the day, he enjoyed the company, but he didn't particularly like shooting. He did shoot a little bit, but astonishingly badly, but safe.
That must be where I get it from.
No, no, you're too self-deprecating there, George. You're not too bad these days. And it's always, well, certainly through the 60s and the 70s, it was all wild birds. We still were lucky enough to have quite a lot of grey partridges in those days. Right through to probably the 80s, I would say, was when the greys disappeared.
And you were involved at that in I guess in the 70s, were you?
My name first appears in the book, and I think it's 1969.
So you've got an old game book.
I've got my father's old game book, and his very, very tiny writing, which makes life quite difficult. Yes, 20th of December, 1969, SMB appears, and that's the first occasion. I've got a feeling that was the occasion when there was actually a shooting accident on the farm, And believe it or not, the person who shot somebody else was a police officer.
Okay.
And that was a foggy day, and somebody moved off their peg. So the absolute cardinal rule.
And so, were you involved in the running of the shoot at that stage, or would you have been a bit...
No, that didn't happen really until probably the early 70s I got involved. And, loved it.
And we should probably just talk a little bit about the landscape here, because I've always felt that, we are on the chalk, but we are not classic Hampshire or Wiltshire chalk valleys, even though if you go about 5 miles in any direction from here, you do get that. So we've got slightly different landscape here, I think, to some of the surrounding...
Yeah, that's a reasonable thing to say. We have some slopes, but they're very gentle. And so, traditionally partridges would have been driven over a hedge with the guns standing, really quite close to the hedge. And of course, the classic English partridges would then starburst over the hedge.
Yeah.
But you would shoot really quite low by today's standards in front of you.
Yeah. And shoot behind as well?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure whether they used to have pickers up in the good old days behind, but certainly the guns would shoot quite low. And if you'd seen a really good partridge shot in the 60s and 70s when they were taking 4 birds out of a covey with a pair of guns, the first one would have been taken practically horizontal in front of you, straight over the top of the hedge.
Yeah. The hedges now, I suppose, have had, the shelter belts have had 40, 50 years of growth since then.
Most of the shelter belts, I should think, were planted post-war, but actually it was the hedges that mattered. And when my father took over the farm, many of the actual hedges were 20 foot high.
Wow, okay.
But getting very straggly. And so he then took them down to probably 8 foot. And they're now lovely thick hedges, but probably not much more than that in terms of height.
Yeah, they'd be about 8 or 9 feet now, wouldn't they, most of them? Yeah, okay. So winding the clock forward then again to, I guess, the 90s, which would be my first memories of shoot days here. Obviously, a lot changed between, say, the 80s when you say the greys more or less disappeared. Yes.
I mean, one of the entries that still absolutely astonishes me, well, there's a couple. The period from 1974 to about 1976 was really amazing. And given that we did not rear a single bird, and nor did any of our neighbours at that time, so 3rd of December 1975, there were 127 wild pheasants and 3 partridges shot.
Goodness
in a
me.
day.
Wow.
With looking at the names, there were some fairly dodgy looking, not very good shots in the line at that point.
Is there a shot count?
No, they didn't have clickers then, as far as I'm aware. And then 1976, which many would know was an absolutely astonishing year. On the 30th of September, we shot 100 partridges, wild partridges, in a day. Yeah.
Grey partridges.
It would have been a mixture.
Right.
But I would think it was probably 50-50 between English and French. And on the 11th of November 1976, we shot 229 wild pheasants in a day and 20 partridges.
Goodness me.
Absolutely astonishing. And I happened to find, when you asked me to do this, I looked back, and we used to do the Game Conservancy partridge pair count in the spring. And in April 1977, so after those 2 phenomenal breeding years, we had, on the south side of the farm, which was 400 acres, 89 pairs of partridges on the south side.
Goodness me.
And on the north side of the farm, 126 pairs, which was about, I think it worked out at about a pair to every 4 or 5 acres. And the Game Conservancy at that stage thought a pair to every 20 acres was a good count.
Assuming a reasonably good breeding, I mean, that's a hell of a header game on the place.
It was a hell of a header game, and the disappointment, of course, is that we now have no greys at all. The redlegs are all reared, and they don't breed terribly well anyway. But it did show what was. We did some keepering then.
Quite a lot of predator control.
Predator control only, and feeding.
Yeah. And obviously then farming practices change.
Yes. I think we have to admit that that's been a major factor. Though I would say probably that the increase in vermin, particularly corvids and foxes, has had them a significantly detrimental effect.
And in terms of the fields and the boundaries and stuff, is it all broadly the same? I know a few hedges have come out over the years, but
no, it's changed quite a lot. The original conifer belts that were planted to drive partridges over, larch and conifers tend to top out on the chalk because they run out of soil, and so they then start falling over. So I removed a lot of those in the early 80s and replaced with some new woods, which are now semi-mature. So we probably planted 50,000 trees in the time I've been here, and planted them very much with the shoot in mind, both to drive things over and to drive things out of.
Yeah. And so the shoot's running the whole time. I'm born 1984, Jim 85, Charlie 88.
Well, your brother was actually born in 86.
He was 86, yes, you're right, sorry.
Yeah, running all the time, never commercial, always been private. We once had a paying gun, which we decided not to do very quickly. And it's a privilege to be able to ask friends and family and do it on that basis. And I've got, looking back in the game book, there are friends of mine who have been shooting here for 40 plus years.
Yes, and probably their parents, some of them as well.
Indeed, very much so. Yeah, so Philip, who shot with us 4 weeks ago, he was there in 1982. And your godfather, definitely here from early 70s, really.
Yeah. So I remember still doing the odd, maybe 100 bird day when we were out beating as kids, and when we were still pushing birds over the A34 and that sort of stuff. It was still a fairly serious operation.
Well, yeah, we started putting a few birds down, I suppose, in the late 80s, something like that. Pheasants then. We didn't shoot that many days. We probably only shot 2 days or maybe 3 in the year.
Yeah.
Now we tend to shoot 5, maybe 6. And if you go back to 1960 and all the way through, you could probably find an average bag throughout those years, right the way through to now, of between 40 and 60, which, from our point of view, is a perfectly nice day's shooting.
Here, yes. So then I think there was a period of time where there wasn't really a shoot on the place, maybe for 10 years or so. I think, we'd release a few maybe, but there wasn't anything in quite the same way.
I had a period in probably the late 80s, it might have been something to do with all those children, when I actually stopped shooting. I got slightly disillusioned with it. I have stopped shooting now, but that's for a different reason. I was shooting a lot at that time, very fortunate to have quite a lot of invitations. And I remember the occasion driving down to Dorset onto a very nice shoot as a guest. And I thought, why am I doing this? I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. So equally, I didn't feel that I wanted to upset all those hosts that I knew well and accept some invitations and not others. And so I just thought the easiest thing to do is to stop for a while. So I probably stopped for about 3-4 years, and the shooting almost certainly didn't happen at that time.
Yeah. But then, I think we probably had our first day here as kids when I was about 10 or 11.
Might be younger than that.
Something
even,
like that. I mean, we were definitely out beating when we were much younger than that. But so there was a bit of a shoot started up. And I guess when we were teenagers, when I was a teenager, then we did have a couple of days a year.
Yep.
And, we'd shoot 30 or whatever. And we were releasing 300 birds, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So a lot's changed in the last 10 years or so.
Well, I think your brother coming back to the place probably made the big difference.
Yes.
And he has rather grander ideas than I had. So, yes, now, I'm not sure he actually tells me what he releases anymore, but I think it's about 500 pheasants and 1,000 partridges, something like that.
Yes, so the big change was, back then we were releasing only pheasants.
Yep.
And then I think maybe we'd had a disappointing day, and a conversation was had, well, this is really partridge country. It was always more of a partridge shoot. The pheasants weren't working terribly well, I seem to remember.
Where I would like to get to, and where I'm trying to persuade Jim, is the only pheasants that fly really well in this country are the wild ones, because they properly stand on their tails and go up.
Yeah.
The reared pheasant doesn't do so well, Partridges are properly exciting. I love shooting partridges, or I did when I still shot. And I think what I would like to get to, and we'll see whether Jim might be persuaded, but he probably won't like this being broadcast. My idea would be to release cocks only for a few years and shoot cocks only pheasants for a few years. So hopefully establish a good stock of wild hens in that period. Yeah. And I think we would potentially then see an improvement in the way the pheasants fly.
But I think that the introduction of the partridges, when would it have been, 5 or 6 years ago, did make an enormous difference to not only to the bags that we were achieving, not that that's particularly important, but it just felt like it was more of a challenge, I think. You know, the partridges were such that it was a very different shoot suddenly.
Definitely. I mean, I've just been pegging out with Jason, the guy who helps now with the shoot. And one of the difficulties, and many shoot owners and shoot captains will appreciate this, is that if you have partridges and pheasants, quite often drives don't work very well for both. You need to distinguish which one you're trying to do. And so the first drive tomorrow when we shoot, I've repegged it, and we are principally trying to get the partridges over the guns. And if they go over the guns, they'll be properly exciting. And the pheasants, maybe we'll pick them up later in the day.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it can be very difficult to have a drive for combined pheasants and partridges.
Yeah, yeah, unless you get a covey of partridge go over very early.
Yeah, but it's also the way you drive them. Yeah. So, you know, you need to angle things differently and so forth. I say this every time when I do the talk at the beginning of the day. It's another experiment, and I think we've been experimenting for the last 60 years. Maybe one day we'll get it right.
Well, I think if we're doing railway tomorrow, we'll be doing it in the third.
I know it's the fourth iteration variation in one season.
Yes, in 4 days. So maybe one of them will work. So, but along with the introduction to partridges, around the same time, I want to say, a lot more trees went in.
Yes, as I said, the shelter belts at the beginning of the 80s were falling down. We didn't have the partridges to drive over them, and they weren't any use for driving pheasants out of. So I started planting woods then, and sighting them in ways that I thought would enhance the shoot. Some have worked, some haven't, and lots of people will be familiar with that. But now we're slightly moving back again, I think, to the idea of particularly driving partridges over hedges, which is so much fun.
Yeah.
And it will change again.
Yeah. And so we've also expanded the area of cover crop, of game cover, and changed what we're planting.
Yeah, in fact, I got my ear bent this afternoon when we were going around on the mule about the cover crops this year, and that they're too thick, and the partridges won't go into them because it's too thick, and so on. And I think we'll maybe look at something slightly different. But it all these things evolve. The countryside stewardship scheme has given us the opportunity to put bigger blocks in, which certainly for driving partridges is a much better bet. But
I mean, again, that was another change that I thought just added another element to my enjoyment of the days here, because you know when you're pushing in big bits of ground, you can be standing on the peg for quite a long time. But with the wild bird seed mixes, you know, you can be pretty confident that a big old cloud of linnets or something's going to come out and give you something to look at for a while you're standing on the peg there, and it does seem to have made a huge difference there.
Oh, for me, a day's shooting, and now I stand at the back of the line and tell everybody they're doing it wrong. But for me, one of the lasting memories from all the days I've had over the years would have been the other wildlife that's been present. And these big blocks of winter bird food have been extraordinary. Huge flocks of linnets and finches, and it's been a revelation, really.
Yeah. So then I suppose that the most recent change, apart from the bigger blocks of cover, has been the flight pond, which Jim and I have got big plans for.
I mean, again, it's funny how these things change, because when I was a teenager, and I think even when you were a teenager too, George, the 1st of September used to be a really special day, because we used to go and sit in the middle of barley stubble fields.
Oh,
on the
yes, I
farm.
remember doing this, yeah.
And the duck would flight into the barley stubbles, and sometimes there were hundreds coming in. And it stopped. It was tremendously exciting. When I was a teenager, we had an old black lab who'd gone blind, and I used to take her because she could still pick up and sit on the field and lean against her, and she would hear the ducks so much earlier than me.
You'd feel her go rigid.
Yes, absolutely.
Amazing.
It may come back, but we actually got the council to dig a pond for us, which was very generous of them, part of a deal on something else. And it would be nice to put some more in, I think.
I think so too. So that's just another bit to it. So I think I'm very excited for our day tomorrow. It's lovely to be able to talk about the shoot in some detail on the podcast, because I think of every shoot in the country, this shoot has been mentioned on the podcast more than any other, which is in some ways a bit laughable, but in other ways I think it's very special that it is. It certainly has a very special place in my heart, and I think in the hearts of everybody who comes to shoot with us. I think one of the things that you've said that bears repeating is that we are incredibly fortunate to be able to run a small shoot that is exclusively for the use of family and friends. And I suppose the only real danger is that as the family continues to increase in size, with the most recent addition in the last week, my sister is engaged to a very keen shot, we're going to run out of pegs for guests at some point.
Well, we could start limiting families, I think. Probably that's another...
I don't think so.
About half the line is taken up by either my children or their spouses or potential spouses. So, yes, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I think. And it won't be me making the decision, so that's even better.
Well, it is really great to have you on the podcast. I know that you've listened a lot and you've been very supportive. So thank you for coming on. It's a shame I couldn't persuade Jim to come on.
He's sleep deprived at the moment, and B, he's a little reticent in some of these matters.
Yes, modest, I think is the word. But it's going to be a great day tomorrow, no matter what happens. And I hope that everybody listening has enjoyed learning a little bit more about the shoot that I go on about so much on the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on, Dad.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so Desert Island Shooting, your extinction level asteroid hits tomorrow. Your affairs are in order, loved ones and enemies reconciled, dogs fed, tomatoes watered. Your last day begins how, Angus?
So presumably I'm not supposed to say have a shepherd's pie with Chris and George and then be shooting with George tomorrow?
Because that'd be really cringe.
Okay, so I'll avoid that.
You can say it if you want to. You can say it if you want to. You can come again.
I've got a bucket list. That I want to do driven grouse. And I think that's not as straightforward as just buying a day. I think there's a lot of a build up to that. So I would love to go somewhere later in the season and get out and do a day's driven grouse. It doesn't have to be a big day, but I'd love to do a day's driven grouse. There'd be a nice 11s. I think there would be a nice high tea, not too boozy, nothing of that nature, because in the evening I'd love to go and do a duck. I just love that, sitting round a pond and hearing that sort of the wings coming fluttering in of an evening later. I don't think that's extraordinary as some of the desert island days have been, but I'd love to do it.
You're going to get sued at Desert Island Shooting.
That's what I mean to say.
Do you know what? One of the things I think, we try and look for patterns in these things. I reckon...
There isn't one?
No, I think 8 out of 10 would have a duck flight in them.
Is that right?
There's some analysis that
There's
needs
some
to be
stats
done.
in there you could probably work out.
I'm not doing it.
Stato Opta Index on
Stato
Desert
corner
Island
for the
Shooting,
next podcast.
Okay, if you
the thing is like that.
So I'm going to say this. So Spotify Wrapped is out now.
Yeah.
Someone shared their Spotify Wrapped with me the other day. I'm not going to name names because it's genuinely terrible. The person in question had listened to 5,000 minutes of the Guns on Pegs podcast this year.
That's more than you've listened to, and you edit it.
It's more than we've broadcast this year, for sure, by like a factor of 10. So that person can go back through all of them again, because obviously they like listening to them.
Or just reel it off the top of their head.
They probably got it memorized.
Yeah.
You can produce a nice graph for us.
I think you're right, though. Wild ducks appears weirdly more than pigeons, because I reckon
the only one who said pigeons was Tom.
yeah,
And
an
one
epic
other.
pigeon day beats a wild duck flight for me. But I mean, a wild duck flight. The lovely thing about it is what you've just said. It's the evening, and actually on a driven grouse day, you could easily do the morning as well.
I guess.
And they just append. They are bookending your ultimate day, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so why not? What else can you do at that point in the day from a shooting point of view? Not a lot.
No.
So
Have you done any grouse shooting?
Walked up, yep, which is wonderful. I've even had grouse pushed over you and shot them. I've stood in a butt on a kind of we'll help you out, but we'll push round the hill and you stand there unsuccessfully. But that day in a grouse butt with them coming at me, one day I need to do it.
I look forward to my invitation.
I see.
I look forward to charging you for my gun.
Yeah. Clever.
Sheldon, what about you?
I'd say a couple of things, really. I've got into shooting more latterly, and I would love to do McNab. I shoot badly, I stalk okay-ish, and I fish even worse, but just the idea of being out on the hill would be phenomenal. But I think one of the things that I listen to and ponder quite a lot through the podcast is how many people have been taught and worked and shot with their fathers. And my dad never shot. He's died 12, 13 years ago now. And I kind of realized I've fallen into this world and I absolutely love it. And I wish I could go shooting with him just to kind of relive that.
That is such a
so
nice
it's an odd inverse to kind of go and shoot with your dad. Is me teaching my dad to shoot would be lovely.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Do you know, you're an old romantic. I'd never
You
realised.
said before.
But that is an absolutely lovely one. I really like that. But you're doing your bit, though, because you said before your daughters are shooting.
Yeah, no,
now,
absolutely.
aren't
I shot clays with my dad once or twice, and then, as I say, kind of got in shooting with Angus, and we've had a great time. And I sit back and look at Angus and Dad, and I listen to you guys. Think, oh, he would love this world. It was built for him.
It's bloody hard not to. I don't understand why the whole world isn't into this.
But absolutely, I think it's great. I love going shooting with my girls, and I love with the wives, and it really is a family event. And I think people who don't get that, people who go for these corporate days, there's something in it. But what's special is going out and shooting with the family and friends, really. So.
Here. Well, so coming up with names for these episodes is sometimes challenging. But this episode is going to be called the Family Shoot episode.
Yeah, nice.
And as
brilliant.
I warned you in my email to you, you are going to be massively outnumbered by Browns tomorrow. We're a big family, and everyone will be there. The whole crew, including my kids, including the newest addition to the Browne clan, will be making an appearance at 11's, I'm led to believe.
Wow.
Poppy is 6 days old.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And she'll be coming out to say hi, I think. So it will be a proper family shoot.
Browne's to the right of us, Browne's to the left of us, into the valley of Brownsley Road. Okay,
Exactly. And it's an absolute honour to have all you with us. So thank you very much. And I absolutely love that Desert Island shooting. A really, really lovely sentiment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, so as per usual, there is one final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive, highly coveted Guns on Pegs podcast shooting stock Garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or by sharing your unpopular opinions, or letting us know about the forgotten drives that you wish you could bring back. Just drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode, we will send you some Garters. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another episode. But until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.
So Game after Alcoholic and Bongo is an amazing tie-up.
all of a sudden.